Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the lower extremity, the legs. If they were animals, they'd be referred to as the hind limb. Our last section we did the arms, the upper extremity, and in animals those would be the forelimb. So today we're going to focus on the upper and lower leg, also known as the lower extremity. So right here, in advance, I kind of blocked in the osteology of the lower extremity. So right here we have the femur. We have the head of the femur, the neck of the femur, the great trochanter, the lesser trochanter. Then we have the shaft of the femur. We have the patella, and then right beneath that we have the tibia. And on the outside here is the fibula. The head of the fibula is kind of an important landmark. It's associated with a few important muscles. And we're not gonna block in the foot today per se, because we'll have another section where we'll go extensively just over the foot. So the other thing I guess I should point out here, because it does play a little bit of an important role, is we have on the inside here, this is the medial condyle, this is the lateral condyle. In the elbow, on the humerus, we have the epicondyle, but on the legs, these are referred to as condyle. So on the inside here, this is the medial condyle. On the outside, this would be the lateral condyle. The patella sits and it runs across both the femur and the tibia. This little section right here on the tibia is also an important landmark. It is the tibial tuberosity. It's a little section here where a lot of the, you'll see here in a minute, some of the patellar ligament and the quadriceps tendon come down and they attach into this area. And this is where you can have some problems, people that get Osgood-Schlatter's, where it's related to growth and the tendons really pull on this area, and so you can have a lot of pain right in that area. So that's an important landmark. Then on the inside of our ankle here, on the inside of the tibia, we have the medial malleolus. And then on the outside of the fibula, this is the lateral malleolus. So we have the medial, lateral malleolus. Then we have here, we have the medial condyle, lateral condyle of the femur, medial condyle, lateral condyle of the tibia. So all important landmarks. And again, we have this little section here, the lesser trochanter, the great trochanter. And then obviously we have the head of the femur. So that is the kind of the makeup of the osteology of the lower extremity. In terms of proportion, very much like the arm, it's very helpful to think that this section from here, from the great trochanter to, and remember it'll run across the pubic bone of the pelvis. That's the halfway point when you're drawing the human figure. And then the halfway point of the lower extremity falls right in here. So this top section would be 1/2. This lower section is 1/2. So if you keep that in mind, that's very helpful. You'll always have legs looking pretty accurate. So basically where the patella is, it sits more or less in the middle. And then you have the upper half and the lower half. So now we'll talk about the legs. And I've laid out 4 different directions here that we'll go over. You can have these obviously bent and have foreshortening and a variety of other situations that can happen with the leg. But for today's purposes, I did the front view, which is the anterior view, the side view from the inside, which is the medial view, the outside, which is the lateral view, and then the back view, which is the posterior view. So again, we have anterior, medial, lateral, and posterior views of the lower extremity. We'll begin here with the anterior view first, and we'll go over all these muscles just for real quickly, and then I'll try to shade one or two of these so you can get a little bit of a section here just to see some of the elements of shading and how they would apply to drawing the leg. It's real helpful to think of this as a whole as a cylinder, and the lower leg is a cylinder, and then you have all these little forms on top of those larger cylinders. So if you keep all that in mind, then the shading is much easier. So to begin with, here we have the anterior superior iliac spine, which is the portion of the pelvis that wraps around. And then we have, this is the common term, a lot of athletes have trouble with this at certain times. This refer to it as a hip flexor, but it is actually the tensor fasciae latae. Tensor fasciae latae. Then this long muscle, this is the longest muscle in the human body. It runs all the way down our inside through here, comes down, and it'll connect right down here onto the inside of our tibia. This is the sartorius muscle. Then we have, these are our quadricep muscles here. Quadricep meaning 4. Technically, we can only see 3. The 4th one is a deeper layer muscle. But we have the rectus femoris right through here. We have the vastus lateralis, which comes through here. We have the vastus medialis, which is like a little teardrop muscle that comes right through here. And underneath, directly underneath the rectus femoris muscle is the vastus intermedius. And that is the 4th muscle in the quadriceps. All of these come here, they connect to a tendon known as the quadriceps tendon, which wraps over the patella, comes across the patella, comes across, there's a fat pad in here, and it will come down here, and it'll attach onto the tibial tuberosity in that area. This little muscle that we have up here on the side, this is the gluteus medius. There's 2 parts to the gluteus medius when you look at it from the lateral view, but from the front you typically see just one portion of it. So this is the gluteus medius, and then this section here is, you see a little bit from the front. This is the gluteus maximus. The great trochanter would fit right in here behind the tensor fasciae latae. Okay, so these are the quadricep muscles. These muscles in here are known as the adductor muscles. This first one in here is the iliopsoas. Then next to that is the pectineus. Then we have the adductor longus. And this longer muscle that we have in here, this is the gracilis. So again, the iliopsoas, the pectineus, the adductor longus, and the gracilis. And these are sometimes referred to as the groin muscles, and the adductor muscles, this group. Then we drop down here to the lower leg, and the lower leg is a lot like the lower arm, where it gets super complicated, especially from certain angles. But we have, right in here is our tibia, and then this is the tibia in here, and then this large muscle that comes right across our shin, right across the tibia. This is known as the tibialis anterior, and it's one of the stronger muscles on the front portion of the leg. Right next to it, it's very similar to what we have on our arm. This is one of the extensor muscles. This is extensor digitorum communis, and that's one of the extensor muscles. And then we have a little muscle that's right in here. It's really tiny, and that's the flexor digitorum communis that goes on the other side of the tibia. But mostly you'll see this muscle right here, which is known as the soleus, and this is your calf muscle, which is called the gastrocnemius. So we see the inside of the gastrocnemius. All the way out here, we see the outside of the gastrocnemius. This is the soleus in here. This is our soleus muscle in here. And then we have the peroneus longus muscle coming right through here. And then right down in here, we see the peroneus brevis. So there's the peroneus longus and the peroneus brevis. So in some points, it's hard to see all the detail of this because they kind of overlap each other at certain angles. And it is very challenging to draw. The main thing to think about when you're drawing the lower leg from front view is when you're drawing the gastrocnemius, the break point up here is high. So it's higher here, it's lower here. A lot of times people will draw the leg when they're first starting out. They'll make the calf muscle up here and the lower leg down here, but it breaks high here, low here, so that you have this angle. The ankle does the opposite. It's higher on the inside, slightly lower on the outside. So we have this angle here, we have that angle here. When you're drawing these, you want to make sure that you get those angles correct. That's really important. That's one of the main things. Another thing that's helpful to think about when you're drawing the quadricep muscles, the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis, and the vastus medialis, is to think of them as they cross like this. If you kind of think of that crossing motion in here, kind of like the triceps brachii I did on the back of the arm, the quadricep muscles do something very similar. But then remember, they all come down here and they all connect into a quadriceps tendon that wraps across the patella and comes down here and attaches to the tibial tuberosity. So now this is the medial view of the leg. And now you can see clearly the sartorius muscle. So the sartorius muscle that we had right here, and it kind of disappears behind the vastus medialis from the anterior view. When you see it from the medial view, you can see the entire muscle. It runs the length all the way down here and connects onto our tibia. It's an incredibly powerful rope-like muscle. Now we see from the side view, here we have the iliopsoas. Right next to that is the pectineus. And then we have, so we had here iliopsoas there, we have the iliopsoas in here. Then we have the pectineus there, pectineus here. You can see it from the medial view how much bigger it is. Then we had the adductor longus through here, adductor longus through here. And then this was the gracilis. This was the gracilis. From this angle, we can see a little bit of the adductor magnus, which is a little bit deeper layer muscle. But from the medial view, you can see a little bit of it in here. So that's the adductor group of muscles. From this angle, we see the rectus femoris, which is one of the quadricep muscles. And now you can see the teardrop shape of the vastus medialis. Then we drop down, and you can see they all go into this tendinous portion, the quadriceps tendon. If you notice here, we can't see from this angle, you cannot see the vastus lateralis. It is on the other side of the leg, so that's not something that's visible here. Here we have the medial condyle of the femur, the medial condyle of the tibia. We have the patella that sits in here with a tibial tuberosity. This is the tibia that runs down here. Coming out of the back here, we have the gastrocnemius, which is our calf muscle. And the gastrocnemius connects to the Achilles tendon, which comes down, and it connects to the back of our calcaneus, which is the back of our tarsal, one of our tarsal bones. Then right next to the gastrocnemius here, we have the soleus muscle. And in here also is the flexor digitorum communis. But the muscle that is the most prevalent through here is the gastrocnemius and the soleus, and then obviously the Achilles tendon. And that's the key muscle structure to think about when you're looking at that particular angle. Now the lateral view of the leg. This is where we can now see, so here we have this part of the pelvis, the anterior superior iliac spine. Then we have the hip flexor, the tensor fasciae latae, right through here. It's a little bit teardrop in shape. We have the great trochanter. So this section right in here of the bone is the great trochanter that a number of the gluteus muscles connect to. So now you can see we have the gluteus medius in two parts. Then we have the gluteus maximus that comes around, wraps, and goes between the vastus lateralis and the biceps femoris, and it will connect onto the femur. So this muscle, somewhat almond shape, this is the vastus lateralis. This is the muscle we see here. As you can see from this angle, the vastus lateralis is a very large, powerful muscle. We see a tiny bit of the rectus femoris. That's this muscle right through here, the rectus femoris. It always comes out to a point and then goes back in. I've chosen to show just a very tiny portion of the vastus medialis here. Depending on the angle, you may or may not see it. I chose to add it here. Then we have this, all of this comes into this quadricep tendon that wraps over our pelvis, and there's the tibial tuberosity where all of that inserts. This vastus lateralis, there's a tendinous portion that goes across this known as the iliotibial band that comes down here, and it connects right in here to the lateral condyle of the tibia. Then we have here, we have the biceps femoris through here, and there's two parts to it. So here we have the long head of the biceps femoris, and then we have the short head of the biceps femoris in here. And then this is the tendinous portion of the biceps femoris. Next to that, we have the semitendinosus muscle that comes through here and comes down, and then we see a little bit of the semimembranosus muscle through here. Now the lower leg. Now we can clearly see here the peroneus longus, and it comes down here, and then we have the peroneus brevis inside. We see the calf muscle, which is our gastrocnemius, the soleus muscle that's connected to that, and then the Achilles tendon comes down and it connects onto our tarsal bone, the calcaneus. This region is the calcaneal region. The actual bone, the tarsal bone here, is the calcaneus, and that's where the Achilles tendon connects. So gastrocnemius, soleus, we have the peroneus longus, peroneus brevis, and here's the extensor digitorum communis through here, and then this tendinous portion comes down through here underneath that band, and then here we have the tibialis anterior. So those are the muscle groups of the lateral view. Now the back view. We can still see the two portions here of the gluteus medius. This is where the great trochanter is. This external portion right here. So that's the right in here, this section that we see. It's an important landmark. Remember, that's the halfway point on the human figure if you're drawing the full figure. So great trochanter, gluteus medius in two parts. Then we have the gluteus maximus that wraps around here, and it would go between the biceps femoris and the vastus lateralis, and it would insert and connect to our femur. This is the vastus lateralis muscle. So as you can see here, it's like this, but from the back view, it goes out higher, and then it comes back in. That's the vastus lateralis. Then we see the biceps femoris. This is the long head, and this is the short head. This is the semitendinosus. These are referred to here as the hamstrings. They're two very powerful rope-like muscles that come down the back of our leg. And then this little section right here is the semimembranosus. Remember, we could see a little bit at the front, but it's a deeper layer of muscle, so we have that coming through here. Then we have here on this inside, we see a little bit, this is the gracilis muscle right here. And we see a little bit of the gracilis muscle right through there. And then, as you recall, we can see a little bit of the adductor magnus right in here. So this little area is the adductor magnus. This is the gracilis. Coming all the way down here now, we have the sartorius muscle that wraps. So if you remember, the sartorius muscle came in here, this long muscle that comes through here. We see a little bit of the back, and it comes here, and it'll wrap back in front of the calf and attach onto the tibia on the other side. And then obviously the vastus medialis muscle that we're seeing here, we can see this vastus medialis muscle in here. So the key for the back view when you're looking at the upper leg is to think of the gluteus medius, gluteus maximus. Remember, gluteus medius has two parts to it. You look for the gray trochanter, which is the halfway point on drawing the human figure. This is a little bit of that tensor fasciae latae muscle, the hip flexor. We see a tiny bit from the front. Then we have the vastus lateralis. We have the biceps femoris, long head and short head, long head, short head. This is the tendinous portion of the biceps femoris. This is the tendinous portion here of the semitendinosus. This whole section is the semitendinosus. This is the semimembranosus. And then that makes up the core of the back, and and the gracilis and the adductor magnus right through here. Then we get drop down. There's a tiny, tiny little muscle in here called the plantaris muscle that goes into the deep layer. But this, usually if you're drawing from life, there's a fold that shows up right here in the skin where the empty area is, where you'd see the bone through, but there's a fleshy fold that forms when you're drawing this with the skin over it. Then we have the calf muscles. So this is the gastrocnemius. And again, remember, it's lower on the inside. It breaks higher up here on the outside. So we have to have that angle here. Remember, we have higher up here, lower down there, higher up here, lower down here. So we have this angle. So this comes down lower, and there's two parts to the gastrocnemius. We have this section in here, and then there's a little split. Some athletes that are really well defined, you can sometimes even see this actual split. So it comes like this, and it wraps around, comes like this, and it wraps around. That's the gastrocnemius on this whole side here and this section here. Then they all come down here and they form into the Achilles tendon, which comes down and it connects onto the back of our calcaneus bone right here, one of the tarsal bones. And then we, as you can see here, we have the soleus muscle that connects to the outside of it, the soleus muscle that connects to the outside of it here. So this is the tendinous portion of the calf muscle, known as the Achilles tendon. This is the gastrocnemius, which is the actual calf muscle. And the soleus muscle on either side comes down, and that makes up the whole back section of our lower leg. Again, here we have the medial malleolus and the lateral malleolus. This is the inside portion, the medial portion of the tibia. This is the lateral portion of our fibula. And remember, this is it's always higher on the inside, lower on the outside. See, higher on the inside, slightly lower on the outside at this angle. Higher on the inside, lower on the outside at that angle. So the calf muscle is always lower on the inside, but the bone is always higher on the inside. So the space between here and here is always less. The space between here and here is always greater. So that's kind of the muscles for each of the osteology of the lower extremity, anterior view of the lower extremity, medial view of the lower extremity, lateral view of the lower extremity, and the posterior view of the lower extremity. So now what I'd like to do is I'll take the, we'll work this way across. And we'll do the anterior view, and I'll just go over some shading principles of the anterior view and the medial view, and then I'll finish the other in a time lapse, just so you can see how it looks when it's all done. So I'm gonna have light coming from above, excuse me, and then from this left side. And we have here the tensor fasciae latae muscle, and it's sort of roundish like this. So I'm gonna put a little bit of tone here on the inside. And as it goes under, I wanna have a little bit of a tone. So I'm gonna always start off kind of lightly, and I want it to get darker as I go. And where it connects here to the bone, I wanna show that little bit of connection there. And then core shadow with reflected light, core shadow through here, and reflected light. And then I want it to go to a halftone. That would be light in this area. Same with the gluteus medius. I want it to show where it connects here to the pelvis. And actually the pelvis is gonna have a core shadow with reflected light. And then now I can show that connection. And then the gluteus medius wraps in through here. Core shadow through here. Halftone above it, reflected light beneath it. Gluteus maximus is going to have core shadow with reflected light. As it goes under, it falls into shadow. Okay, now the sartorius. The sartorius, I want to show that it connects to the bone. The end of the pelvis here, I want to have a tone. I want to have a little bit of tone on the inside of the pelvis here. Remember, we want light to remain in the middle of the form, not on the edges of the form, so that it looks as three-dimensional as possible. So the sartorius muscle is going to come down here and wrap through. I want to put a light tone on this bottom section. As it starts to go under, it's going to fall into shadow. I want to put a tone on the top portion so that the light remains inside the form. Then right here on the iliopsoas, right there, I have a core shadow. And underneath, I have reflected light. The light's going to sit in this area in here. And then I want to have a little bit of a tone on the top so that the light remains inside that form. So as you can see, we want to think of the whole leg as one big cylinder, but then there's lots of little cylinders on top of it. So core shadow through here. The pectineus muscle has same thing, core shadow with reflected light. A little bit of cast shadow in here to separate between the muscles. Same in here, I want it a little bit darker in there, so cast shadow inside that form. Then the adductor longus muscle is going to have core shadow through here with a reflected light, and all of this is going to fall into shadow. So I want this to be the plane. This would wrap around here and then around here. So all of that's going to fall into shadow. But I still want to have some core shadow on the gracilis muscle. Sartorius muscle comes in front, gracilis goes behind, and cast shadow inside that area between those two muscles. A little bit of tone on the top, very slightly. So it should start to look a little bit more sculptural now. So now we have the rectus femoris muscle. So the light's going to fall somewhere in here, and there's a little split on the top portion here. So I'm going to show that little indication. And then the rectus femoris muscle, where it comes in, has this tone. And we have a tone on this outside. Now, underneath the tensor fasciae latae muscle, this is going to go in because it inserts deeper. So I wanted to put that into a cast shadow underneath. So this muscle is going to merge out of there. So I want it to come out of the darkness. The hip flexor is casting a shadow on it. Then the vastus medialis is going to have a little bit of a tone here on the inside. Remember, light's coming from this direction, so light will fall in here. And I'll have that coming out of a little bit of shadow. The vastus lateralis is going to have core shadow through here. And all of this is going to come in. There's a tone here on the outside. So we want this to wrap around this way. So we always tried to shade with the form to help create the three-dimensional aspect. Then we have our rectus femoris through here. And all of this is going to connect in a tibia or into a tendinous portion here. It's going to come down and connect to this tibialis, the tuberosity of the tibia, right through there. Now the patella is going to fall into shadow. There's a top plane to the patella. So this top plane is going to have light on it. This bottom section is darkest through here, comes through here, and then there's the fat pad underneath. So we want to show that with the patellar tendon. Then we have the medial condyle coming in through here. The tibial condyle coming in through here. The tibia. Then this portion of the calf muscle, the gastrocnemius, is going to have a core shadow through there. The soleus comes out through here, but all of this is going to fall into the same plane of shadow. Then the tibialis anterior, the powerful extensor muscle right through there, and it connects up here under the outer portion of the tibia. Then right in here is the tendinous portion. And then we have the extensor digitorum communis. And this is going to come down, and there's a whole bunch of tendons that come and run through here. There's a band that holds all of these in place. And then we have the inside of our tarsal bones coming through here. We'll put a tone on that just to give an indication of the foot. Then we have the medial malleolus. And the lateral malleus has a little bit of a tone here. Remember, the lateral malleolus is from the fibula. The medial malleolus is from the tibia. And it's a little bit darker here, a little bit of a cast shadow in there. The gastrocnemius that we see on the outside, and it combines with a little bit of the soleus. This is the head of the fibula. The biceps femoris muscle tendinous portion comes down here and connects. So we see here the biceps femoris tendinous portion, and then again we have the iliotibial band that's in here. So those are kind of important landmarks. And this casts a little bit of a shadow. The vastus lateralis, a little bit of shadow on the biceps femoris tendon. And then the head of the fibula, the gastrocnemius, and so forth. And put a little bit of a tone here where the vastus medialis comes across and connects here. We want to show that shading so that it all has a form. The tibial tuberosity gets softer and connects now to the inside of the tibia. And as now you can start to see the light and shadow developing, but also shading all the individual muscles as well. So this part of the sartorius where it wraps around also falls into shadow. So I want to show that tone. Even though something falls into shadow, it still has form. So we want to include that form in there. And then the fat pad underneath here. So now it should start to look fairly sculptural. And if you notice when I shade, I don't smear the pencil. I try to keep it as clean as possible. And then so that when I add the highlights, it'll look real nice in the end, hopefully. Okay, so that is more or less the shading. Just do a little indication here of the foot, and then there's a plane here. You have a series of planes in here that develop. Okay, so that's the anterior view of the lower extremity. Now I'll do one more here. This one's actually can be a little challenging for people to draw in the beginning, so I'll help with this one. So this is the medial view of the leg, and to think the planes, this is going to come around here like this, and then it's going to come around like that. So come in here, and then it goes around like this. But within those larger planes, you have individual planes. So first I'll block in here. This is the sartorius. Remember, that's the longest muscle in the human body. It's like a big rope that'll come all the way in here. This lower section pretty much all falls into shadow as it comes down and connects to the tibia by the way that the planes work out. Then we have the rectus femoris. And there's a core shadow through here, reflected light underneath, and we need to make sure we put a tone on the top to keep the light inside the form, not on the edge. So even if you can't see there's a tone on the edge, you always have to include it. Sometimes you have to draw what you know and not always necessarily what you see. Then the vastus medialis comes through here. This is the teardrop muscle. Light tends to fall up in this area and here, so the rest is going to have a tone. And remember, when I have a tone on the top section, light remains within the form. And then it's all going to connect to this tendinous portion, and it's going to, here's our patella. So this was our patella from the front view. So now you can see that it's a plane that goes back under. And the tibial tuberosity has a tone in here. And then we have the medial condyle, which is our bone right in here. This is what we're seeing in here, is this section in here. So put a little tone through here. All of this is going to have a tone up in there where this wraps around the sartorius. And then this is the condyle right in here. You can see that little shelf up here. that is the condyle for the tibia. And the tibia all comes down through here. So we see this bone, we have core shadow through here, reflected light. Okay, and then let's move back up here and let's work on this adductor group. So we have this tone through here, darker in there, reflected light. Right in here, darker, darker through here, reflected light. And same in here. Now this is all going to come down through there. And this muscle wraps all the way through. A little bit of tone in there. Then the gracilis muscle, or actually this is the semitendinosus from this side. This is the back, this muscle we see right here, that is this right here. So we're gonna put a tone on that. And we wanna blend it a little bit. And this part of the sartorius starts to wrap under. As it comes around, it starts to wrap under. So I want to make sure I have that tone on here so that we're keeping light on the top of the form. This adductor muscle is gonna, I want to make sure I get that plane in the appropriate place. And vastus medialis. Now we'll get down here to the calf muscle. This is the gastrocnemius. So then there's a plane here and here. So we want to make sure we have all of this go under. And the darkest portion is in here. This is the core shadow. There's a little area in here in an athlete that's well developed. You see this actual separation of the in the gastrocnemius. This is going to cast a little bit of shadow. The sartorius, where it comes across and reconnects, is going to cast a little bit of a shadow onto the back of the gastrocnemius. Then we have the Achilles tendon that comes down through here. The soleus muscle in here has a tone. And you can see a little bit also of the flexor digitorum communis in through here as well. So that's a little division in here. In many well-defined athletes, dancers, all this muscle structure can be pretty clearly seen if somebody works out a lot. And then here we see, so this tibialis anterior that we have right here, even from the medial view, you'll see a little bit of it here come out. A lot of people when they draw the leg, they forget to put this little section that comes forward. They always do just make a concave line here, which is not a strong line. There's actually a convex line here, and that's the tibialis anterior. So you have this portion here where the tendon comes out over the patella, goes out, back, and it goes out and back, and then it goes out to the tibialis anterior, and then it comes back in. Just like the wrist gets thinner, the thinnest point of the ankle is up in here. It always gets thicker near the joints. That's an important thing to remember, is that when you, as bones approach the joints, it always gets thicker. So always remember to make that thicker when you get to those areas. That's a common mistake in the beginning when you're first learning to draw, is to have everything get too thin near the joints. And then there's a little bit of tone here on the inside of the tibia. This bottom section of the tibia. This is the medial malleolus on the inside, remember? Lateral malleolus on the outside. And this has a tone underneath it. There's a rounded area in here where usually a highlight falls in there somewhere. Good to know for painting purposes. And the sartorius grafts onto the bone in here. That's our long rope-like muscle that runs through here. Just soften that a little bit. Let's soften this cast shadow a little bit through here, just to make it a little cleaner through there. So another thing that I find very helpful when you're shading is I always, even when I'm wrapping around on both sides, I make a core shadow here near the edge. Even though the light's coming from this side, you want it to make it look like it goes around. So I always add a core shadow through here with reflected light on that other edge. Core shadow through here, reflected light on that other edge. And then I want to do the same right through here, because I want it to look like it wraps around on both sides, and by adding the core shadow makes that work out very well. So let me just darken this core shadow in here a little bit more. Same in here. I want to make sure I get this plane so that light's staying in here. And through here. So now I want to think of the bigger picture of the plane and the cylinder. So I have all this plane running in through here. So I want light in here, and then light on the top in here. Then I need to get this plane. So we had that patella coming under, and I need to make sure I get that coming in there as well. We can have a little bit of light here on this top tendinous portion, a little light on that fat pad there. And all of this tibia is going to start to come under. There's a little bit of a tone in here. So in the end, you want it to look as believable as possible. Okay, so that just is a quick overview here of the different aspects of the lower extremity. Remember, on an animal, this would be the hind limb. The arms are the forelimb, the legs are the hind limbs of animals. If we were walking on all fours, this would be our hind limb. We refer to it as the lower extremity. The arms are referred to as the upper extremity. So here we have the osteology, the bones of the leg. We have the proportions where it's this half. And if you notice, I tried to keep that pretty accurate all the way through so that everything matches up fairly well proportionately. And then the rest was just talking about the principles of shading. So we have, again, we have the anterior view of the osteology of the lower extremity, anterior view of the muscle structure. We have the medial view, lateral view, which is the outside, and the posterior view, which is seen from behind. And all the muscle groups are pretty clear. And remember, just like in the lower arm, the lower legs get fairly complex because of all the smaller muscles and the tendons and so forth that come down and connect to our toes. So I hope that you find this useful, and it'll really help with your overall depiction of drawing the human figure. The legs are fun because there's so much power in the legs. It's what gives us all of our movement. I really enjoy drawing the legs, and I hope you enjoy this and learn something from this today as well. So now I will move from here to the time lapse, and in the time lapse I'll finish the rest of the drawing, add the highlights, and try to clean up a few of the details as well. So here we go. Now for the time lapse.